Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. This one's pretty spooky.
Oh, yeah.
This time we're going into the haunting of the Perron family.
Ooh.
So if you've seen The Conjuring, you kind of have a visual already.
Right.
But we're going to go deeper than the movie. Deeper into the real life case that inspired that whole film and franchise, really.
You know, and it's one of those cases that really drew a lot of attention because of who was involved.
Right. The Warrens.
Yeah.
Ed and Lorraine Warren. Like the paranormal investigators.
Yeah, they were huge back in the 70s.
So let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Back to 1971, the Perron family. They move into this farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
This old farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island.
Beautiful place. I mean, on the surface, you would think dream home. Right.
Totally. A total dream home. But it quickly descends into a complete nightmare for them.
It's like, you move in, you're unpacking boxes, getting settled, and suddenly things just start to feel off.
And it wasn't just like one or two isolated events, right? This is like,
I don't know.
This is like a whole series of escalating paranormal activity. Right?
Yeah, it started subtly. Little things moving, dishes clattering. Maybe you hear a whisper when no one's there.
Creepy.
But it escalates. You start seeing shadows, full-on apparitions.
It's really scary to think about, especially for the children, right?
Absolutely. Imagine that as a child, seeing things your parents can't explain.
It makes you think, like, psychologically, what does that kind of prolonged exposure
right.
to those sorts of events, like, what does that do to a kid's mind?
It's a lot for anyone to process.
Yeah.
But especially kids who, their imaginations are already so active.
Yeah.
They're more open to believing.
Do you think there's like a scientific reason why children might be more sensitive to paranormal phenomena, or is it just that they're more open to that sort of thing?
That's a good question. I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
Their minds aren't as rigid as set in logic as adults.
Yeah.
They see the world differently.
So the family is obviously terrified. They're desperate for help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the Warrens come in.
Ed and Lorraine.
They were pretty serious about their work, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. Very devout Catholics.
Oh, right.
They believed that demonic forces were real and they were fighting them.
So they weren't just ghost hunters. They were like demon hunters.
Exactly. They believed in good and evil, heaven and hell.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is, but they felt it was their calling.
What were their investigations like? Did they use any special, I don't know, gadgets or techniques?
Well, they did a lot of interviews trying to understand the patterns of the activity.
Yeah, okay.
They'd examine the house very carefully. And they also used cameras, recording devices.
They try to capture evidence.
Exactly. They wanted proof.
Yeah. So they were trying to blend, like, their spiritual beliefs with a more scientific approach.
Yes, they wanted to validate their findings.
Interesting. Now, the Perron's home wasn't just any farmhouse, right?
No, not at all.
This house had a really long and dark history.
Oh, yeah. It goes back to the 18th century. Lots of tragedy associated with that land.
Yeah. There were drownings, mysterious deaths. Didn't a woman hang herself in the barn?
That's right, Mrs. John Arnold.
Mrs. Arnold, yeah.
Yeah.
It's chilling. You have to wonder if all that negative energy, if it seeped into the house itself.
The Warrens definitely thought so.
Really?
They believed that those tragic events, the deaths, Mrs. Arnold's suicide, they all contributed to what the Perron family experienced.
Like it created a breeding ground for paranormal activity.
Exactly. A place where spirits could get trapped.
So we've got this haunting these investigators, this house with a dark past, and then there's the movie The Conjuring.
Ah, yes.
How much of the film is actually true to what the Perrons went through?
That's what we're going to get into.
Okay, so let's talk about the movie. So anyone who's seen the movie, there's that one scene, in the basement.
Oh, yeah.
Super creepy. You hear this clapping coming from the darkness. Nobody's there.
Mm-hmm.
Did something like that really happen to the Perrons?
It did. Andrea Perron, one of the daughters, she's talked about hearing that clapping.
No way.
Yeah, in the basement when she was home alone.
That's terrifying.
Mm.
The movie also features Bathsheba, this witch who's behind it all.
Right.
Was she a real person?
Bathsheba Sherman was a real person, yeah. She lived on the property in the 1800s.
Okay.
Now, whether she was a witch, that's debatable.
Yeah.
But there are all these local legends.
Like what?
Oh, some say she sacrificed her own child to the devil.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Pretty dark stuff.
Is there any proof of that? Or is it just like spooky stories?
It's hard to say for sure. Historical records aren't always reliable, and stories change over time.
Right, right.
But the fact that her name's connected to the haunting, it means something. It's like, even if she wasn't a witch, literally, maybe the fear, the stories about her, maybe that created a negative energy, you know?
It's possible, and it goes back to what we were saying about kids being sensitive. Maybe people's beliefs, their fear, even centuries ago, it kind of stuck around.
Wow.
And the Perrons, they tapped into that.
So the movie definitely took some creative liberties.
Oh, of course.
But the core of it, the terror the family felt, that seems real.
Absolutely. They took a real story and made it, cinematic.
Yeah.
But the foundation is there.
It's a good reminder that behind all the Hollywood stuff, there's a real family, a real haunting.
Oh, right. They went through something truly terrifying.
Which leads to the big question.
Yeah.
Was the Perron house really haunted?
Right.
We've heard the stories, the history, the Warrens' investigation, but could there be other explanations?
There always could be. Maybe it was environmental stuff, sounds, drafts, things they misinterpreted, or maybe psychological factors. Stress, a new place, all the stories they'd heard.
So like a shared delusion, almost.
It's possible.
But then again, maybe it was something supernatural.
That's the question, isn't it? What do you believe?
It's what makes this case and The Conjuring so fascinating.
It makes you think about the nature of reality, the unknown.
Like, do we trust our gut even when it tells us something that doesn't seem logical?
Or do we stick to what we can explain? It's a tough one.
This case really forces you to face those questions.
It does. We have the history, the investigation, the personal stories.
And even Hollywood's take on it.
It's like a puzzle with all the pieces.
But we still don't know what the picture is.
Exactly. And we each get to decide what we see.
And that's what's so great about these deep dives.
Yeah. We get to explore, we get to think, to have these conversations.
Like detectives trying to crack a case.
But this case, it may not have a clear answer.
So, what do we do? Do we believe?
Yeah.
Or do we stay skeptical?
It's up to each of us, really. There's no right or wrong answer here.
Yeah.
The important thing is to be open-minded, to look at all the possibilities.
You know, it's funny. It's like those ghost stories you tell around a campfire.
Yeah.
You know it's not real, but you still get that little shiver.
That what-if feeling.
Exactly. And the Perron case, it taps into that.
That primal fear of the unknown.
It's one of the reasons The Conjuring was so successful, I think.
Definitely.
But it wasn't the only case the Warrens investigated, not by a long shot.
Oh no, they had so many.
Does that make their work more credible? Or less?
That's a good question. On one hand, you could say, wow, they dedicated their lives to this.
Right.
It clearly meant something to them.
But on the other hand, some people say they saw what they wanted to see.
It's a valid point. We have to be careful not to let our own desires, our desire to believe, cloud our judgment.
But sometimes the evidence, or at least the stories, they're just so convincing.
I know what you mean.
Like with the Perrons, you have the whole family, the kids too.
Right.
All saying they saw the same things.
That's hard to ignore when you have that many witnesses.
So after all this, what's the verdict? Do we believe? Or stay skeptical?
I think that's a personal choice. What matters is being open-minded, considering everything.
And respecting different viewpoints.
Exactly. And that's why I love these deep dives. We get to explore, to think, to talk about all this.
It's like we're all at a virtual campfire sharing these stories.
I like that. And even if we don't get a definitive answer, the journey itself, it's fascinating.
So to wrap up, one last question for you, for everyone listening.
Okay.
Was the Perron house truly haunted? What makes you believe or not believe in the paranormal? It's crazy to think we all bring our own baggage to these stories, right?
Definitely.
Like, are we predisposed to believe? Or are we totally shut off to anything that can't be, scientifically proven?
It's a tricky thing.
Yeah. In the Perron case, it brings all that to the surface, doesn't it?
It does. You have the history, the personal accounts, and then the Hollywood version on top of it all.
It's like we're all drawn to the mystery, but then we have to figure out where we stand on it all.
Exactly.
Like, are we believers? Are we skeptics?
It's like everyone has their own internal, ghost detector.
I like that.
And some people's detectors are super sensitive, picking up every little thing.
Right.
And others, they need to see a ghost, like right in front of them.
A full-on apparition.
Yeah, to even consider it.
And I guess those detectors, they can be influenced by all sorts of things, right?
Absolutely.
How we were raised, what we've experienced, our culture.
What plays a role?
So that what might seem like a total haunting to one person, to someone else, it's nothing.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so interesting.
Yeah.
We get to hear all these different perspectives, challenge our own ideas.
Maybe even recalibrate our ghost detectors a little.
Well, exactly. It's all about learning, about the world, the seen and the unseen.
And sometimes the best mysteries are the ones we never fully solve.
I agree.
Speaking of mysteries.
Yeah.
One thing that always stuck with me about the Perron case was that the Warrens, so the house was built on cursed land. Right. Is there any truth to that? Or is it just like a spooky legend?
Well, the idea of cursed land, it's a pretty common theme in folklore, in mythology.
Yeah.
It usually comes from a place's history. Battles, tragedies, ancient rituals.
So the land absorbs all that energy.
Yeah, and it creates this lingering, unsettling feeling.
So in the case of the Perron house, could it be that Mrs. Arnold suicide, the other deaths,
Yeah.
could that have contributed to this idea of a curse?
The Warrens thought so. They believed those events created like a spiritual vortex. Where the line between our world and the spirit world, it's very thin.
And the house was built back in the 1700s. When people really believed in witchcraft, the supernatural.
That definitely could have played a part. The fear, the paranoia around witches back then, it was very real. People blamed everything on curses.
So it makes sense that those beliefs, they might have stayed in the area,
Exactly. It becomes part of the fabric of the place.
It's like the fear itself becomes part of the curse.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow. It makes you think about the power of belief, right?
It does.
Like, even if there wasn't a real curse, maybe believing in it, maybe that was enough to make it real for the people who live there.
It's possible.
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder about how our minds work.
Yeah.
Like, if we believe something strongly enough, can we actually make it happen? Or do we just see what we want to see?
That's the big question. Philosophers, scientists, they've been trying to figure that out forever.
Right.
And there's no easy answer. But it's exciting, isn't it?
It is.
It means there's still so much we don't know.
About the world, about ourselves, about what's real and what's not.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
Yeah.
We've gone deep into the Perron family's haunting, the history, the evidence, the Hollywood version.
We covered a lot.
But in the end, the real takeaway is that the search for truth, for the unknown, it's a journey, and we have to be open to everything.
I agree. Whether you believe in ghosts, demons, curses, or just the power of our own minds.
It's fascinating to explore these things.
Look into the shadows and wonder what might be there.
So as we finish up this deep dive, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep that sense of wonder.
It's what keeps things interesting.
And remember, the next time you hear a bump in the night, it might be the wind, or it might be something else.
Ooh, spooky.
The choice is yours to believe.
Oh.